felt like a betrayal, like admitting I was defective, like confessing something that would get me quietly judged and slowly pushed out of the circle of good mothers. Every time he said, "I love you, Mommy," a voice in my head whispered, "If you were a good mother, you wouldn't feel this way." So I smiled, I hugged him, I said it back, and I carried the fear alone. By the time I finally said it out loud to Mark, I was exhausted from holding it in. After I said it, I waited. I expected anger, disbelief, maybe even disgust. Instead, Mark just said, "Okay." Then he looked at me and said, "Talk to me." And something inside me cracked. At first, it came out slowly, broken sentences, half-formed thoughts. I told him it wasn't one big moment. It was hundreds of small ones. The day our son threw a toy so hard it chipped the wall. Not out of cruelty, but pure, uncontrolled frustration. The way his voice changed when he felt cornered. The way he went quiet instead of crying. I told Mark how I saw pieces of my own family in him. The temper, the stubbornness, the emotional shutdowns, and how no one ever taught me how to handle those things. Not in myself, and certainly not in a child. I told him how my mind fast-forwarded constantly, how I didn't just see a 9-year-old with big emotions. I saw a teenager I couldn't reach, an adult who didn't know how to regulate himself. I told him I was terrified my anxiety was shaping him, that I was so afraid of what might happen that I was already living in it, and underneath all of it, the real fear, that I wasn't equipped for the most important job of my life, that my failures would somehow damage this incredible human being I loved more than anything. When I finally stopped talking, I felt empty, raw, exposed. Mark didn't rush in with solutions. He didn't say, "He's just a kid." He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He took my hand and said, "Thank you for telling me. That must have been so hard to carry alone." And just like that, something lifted. He didn't validate the fear, but he validated me. He admitted he worried too, about our son's intensity, about finding the right balance between discipline and understanding. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. That night, we talked for hours, not trying to fix anything, just finally telling the truth. We realized my fear wasn't a failure. It was a signal that something needed attention, that silence was doing more damage than honesty ever could. The next morning, the fear was still there, but it didn't own me the same way. Naming it changed it. I realized that before I could change anything else, I had to start with myself. So I did something small. 5 minutes each morning, sitting quietly, breathing, letting my thoughts come and go without chasing them. It was harder than I expected. My mind raced constantly, but slowly I learned I didn't have to believe every thought I had. I started journaling too, writing down the moments when the fear showed up, what happened, what I felt, what story I was telling myself. Seeing it on paper helped me separate fact from fear. The fact my son slammed his door. The fear he's going to become an angry, isolated adult. I began to see how often my anxiety jumped ahead of reality. I wasn't a bad mother for feeling scared. I was a human mother who needed support. As I changed, our family changed with me. Mark and I became more intentional about how we listened, really listened, to our son. Phones down, eyes up. No rushing to fix. When he talked about his day, we asked how it felt instead of what happened. We stopped leading with fear. Instead of yelling, "Be careful," we said, "Pay attention. You've got this." I even started being honest with him in a way he could understand. I told him sometimes Mommy feels anxious, that I take deep breaths when my body feels overwhelmed. I realized something important. Teaching a child how to manage emotions doesn't come from pretending you don't have any. It comes from showing them what to do with them. It's been 6 months since that night. Our family isn't perfect, but it's honest. The fear hasn't disappeared, but it no longer controls me. Now, when it shows up, I listen to it. Not as a verdict, but as a signal, a reminder to slow down, to check in, to connect. The biggest change isn't in my son. It's in the space we've created for all of us to be human. More grace, more laughter, more truth. That one terrifying confession didn't break our family. It opened it. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. Sometimes courage is being terrified and telling the truth anyway. And sometimes that's where healing begins. I need to say this the way it actually happened. Not the polished version. Not the version that sounds like a lesson. The words came out before I could stop them. I think I'm scared of him. We were sitting in our living room. Nothing dramatic. No argument. No raised voices. Just the soft hum of the house at night. Mark was reading, half lost in his book when I said it. He looked up at me, at first confused, then concerned. And in that moment, the silence felt heavier than any fight we'd ever had. Because once those words were out, there was no putting them back. The secret I'd been carrying for months, maybe longer, was suddenly sitting between us. And I had no idea if our family would survive it. I wasn't scared of my son in the way people imagine when they hear that sentence. Not scared that he would hurt me. Not scared to be alone with him. He was 9 years old, funny, smart, energetic, still climbed into our bed during thunderstorms. What I was scared of was something deeper, something harder to explain. I was scared for him. Scared of what lived inside him. Scared of what lived inside me. For months, this fear followed me everywhere. It sat in my chest when I made his breakfast. It whispered to me when I watched him play. It tightened my stomach during car rides home from school. It showed up during his tantrums. The ones that felt too big for a child his age. The kind where his face went red, his body rigid, his words sharp in a way that felt older than 9. It showed up when he shut down, when his eyes went distant, when hours passed before he'd speak again. And it showed up at night when I watched him sleep. His face would be soft, peaceful, still my baby, and I'd feel this overwhelming love, the kind that hurts, and right behind it would come the dread. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not the mother he needs? What if my flaws become his future? I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family. Because what kind of mother admits she's scared of her own child?